got the cornfield calm, Midwest tone, but he's spitting facts like a dog with a bone. Lanky frame, fire-haired, eyes on the case, breaking down the game in the darkest place. Sports scores to murder boards, Hoosier logic cuts like swords. From Friday lights to chalked out lines, this redhead's brain rewrites the lines. Inside the Hoosier mind, where the stories twist and stats unwind. He's a legend in flannel, mic in hand, digging deep where few can stand. From touchdowns to crime scenes raw, he's got the truth in every draw. Yeah, step in if you dare to find what's brewing inside the Hoosier mind. He'll talk Pacers, Colts, or Colts on trial. Hoosier humor with a devilish smile. He's that redhead sleuth with a box of clues. Takes your headline, breaks the news. With every stat and every scream, he's painting portraits in your stream. Don't blink, he'll tie it tight. From game night wins to murder flight. Inside the Hoosier mind, where the facts hit hard and the lines are blind. He's a ginger ninja, sleuth and slick, cracking cases play by play quick. From courtrooms to the hardwood floor, he digs for more than just the score. Tune in and don't rewind, you're deep now inside the Hoosier mind.
All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome in to Inside the Hoosier Mind, brought to you by Military Broadcast Radio, helping give veterans a voice. I am going to be joined by Yoel, Big Dog Hyman. He's had a little bit of some technical difficulties, but we should still have him via audio at least. For anybody who has watched the show before, Yoel has been on the show quite a few times. He's a lifelong Giants fan, huge fan of football just in general. And sir, appreciate you coming back on the show. Just sorry that you're having technical difficulties anyway.
Yeah, I don't know why my camera isn't working today. I guess no one wants to see me. I actually grew my beard out a little bit as a tribute to you, my friend.
Oh, I appreciate that. I know.
I figure you're doing getting the Texas goatee happening. I got to grow a little bit.
Well, I don't know if last time you saw me, I had it down to like about here. Real close to like mid chest, and then I shaved it. I didn't shave completely down, but I shaved it really short, like into May, beginning of June, and now I've got a little bit of it back. So
getting ready for that Indiana winter, huh?
Oh, because it's gonna be nice and cold. Hey, we were in like a streak there. It was like 60s and 70s there for about 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden this past week, it was like 90s again. It's like, I don't like this. Like, take me back to fall weather. You spoiled me. You gotta give me the rest of it.
Oh, that is crazy.
But speaking of crazy, we had a little bit of a wild college football weekend. We had a little bit of a wild NFL weekend. But all honesty, most of the stuff that has been the most interesting that's happened in college football has just been today and yesterday. As far as coaches being fired and whatnot, and even coaches that we see on the hot seat right now, and one of those being Clemson. They start out, they're 1-3, the worst they've ever been under Dabo, and they not only lost to Syracuse, they were getting blown out by Syracuse. And what's even worse, they were getting blown out in at Clemson at quote unquote Death Valley, because LSU can claim the real Death Valley of that week 1 win. The bad part, though, with every loss that Clemson has, it makes that win for LSU look that much worse, because LSU just barely pulled out the win. You had posed the question to me just shortly after it happened. Do you think Dabo is on the hot seat? And I think you even messaged me that after the Georgia Tech loss.
Yeah.
And then it's really probably heated up after the Syracuse blowout when they were down, 24-14 just at the half. To you, do you think Dabo's on the hot seat? And do you think Clemson would be willing to fire him? Because I mean, he took him to 2 national titles and he's taken him to multiple national titles. They've won 2. And I mean, they're always a threat in the ACC. They've always done really well as far as doing homegrown talent and being competitive. And really, outside of the Big Ten, the Clemson is the only team that has given the SEC any type of a run for its money over the last few years in college football. So, do you really think they would let him go over something like this, or do you think they give him a pass of like, look, you're struggling, but we definitely need to have a conversation about how you do things?
It's interesting. I heard a lot of things today on the radio. I was listening to a lot of things, and the biggest thing I heard was Dabo had 3 transfers in the transfer portal this year on his team. 3 transfers. Miami had 18. FSU had 21.
Yep.
Where's Miami? Where's FSU? And where's Clemson?
Yep.
We all know for a fact that Clemson isn't game on this whole NIL thing. Well, neither was Nick Saban. Now Nick Saban's sitting next to Pat McAfee, looking at him like, just like you see the faces he makes sometimes when McAfee comes out with his stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And you said they before COVID they went to they were in 5 playoffs. They went to 4 national championship games, won 2. Since 2020, the program. I mean, they made the playoffs last year because they won their conference championship because they made the playoffs last year, but didn't really fare well in the first round.
Yeah,
it's a program like this. They've been the signature program of the ACC. I mean, are the tides turning with Miami and then Florida State coming back? Possibly. SMU seems to be a perennial contender. Who knows if Belichick will turn his North Carolina team around? We don't know. They haven't looked very good, in the beginning. But then again, his assistant coach looks great, as we all know.
Right. Every time.
Did you see that outfit, by the way, she was wearing on the sideline? That was crazy.
Yes, I did.
So, I think it really depends on 2 things. What happens come the rest of the season with Clemson? Let's look at their schedule. They play North Carolina this week at North Carolina, and then they go to Boston College. Yeah. On paper, those should both be wins. But then they're home to SMU, who, could be a challenge. They're home to Duke. Then they're home to Florida State, which right now is ranked 8th. Who knows what they'll be ranked by then? Florida State plays Miami on the 4th. So that'll definitely tell the tale of what Florida State's really all about. That game's in Tallahassee, by the way. Okay. They have Louisville, then they have Furman or Roast Beef Tech, and then they end against South Carolina. So, I mean, looking at this schedule, they're 1-3 right now. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 6 wins. 6 wins total.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you have them losing to Florida State.
Losing to State, losing to SMU.
Okay.
And, and then those are all both at home, but I just think the talent pool for those programs are better right now. Yeah. So let me say that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So I see them being North Carolina, Boston College, Duke, Louisville, because Louisville is very unpredictable. Yeah. Furman and South Carolina. So that's 6. So they'll have 7 wins total. They'll be bowl eligible, but they'll be 7-5? 7-5 for the year. Yeah. A very off year. Then it's like, what do the boosters do? What do they want? And I think a lot of it all depends on what happens in the conference during the rest of the year. If Miami and Florida State have a great showing and both end up in the playoff, 2 ACC teams who, especially an ACC team who finished with 2 wins last year, makes that turnover with 21 transfers, NIL money, they're basically going to tell Dabo, look, you got to play ball with the big boys now. It's a whole different ball game. And, he has to. He's been there a long time. And as we found out with one of the firings today, which I know we'll get to, maybe the message can get lost after a while, if you think about it.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's the other thing that people need to realize, too. And I do want to add real quick before I go into that. I did see a meme earlier of, Dabo supposedly made the quote similar to like what Nick Saban did of, the day that I have to start paying players is the day that I quit coaching. And there's a lot of people that said, okay, well, he officially quit coaching because now they're 1-3 to start the year officially. So like, it's maybe not that far off. And I think the other thing that is what is really disappointing, and I think it really frustrates Clemson fans, is you look at this Clemson team. they were bringing so many people back as far as starters, experience. Like you said, they didn't utilize the transfer portal hardly at all. So they didn't supplement any key positions that they probably need a lot of help in. And they're like, look, we're homegrown. We've got all the talent. We've got experience. Like you said, they went 10-3 last year because they won the ACC. And although they lost to Texas, and I'm not going to say they kept it competitive, but they weren't exactly just blown out by Texas either last year in that first round of the playoffs. So there was a lot of expectations coming into this season. And then you look at that LSU game, realistically, they should have won that, even as an LSU fan. You know, I watched that. They got 2 fumble recoveries because the LSU receivers just dropped it, and they end up turning those into points. They're up 10-3, you know, and then the next thing you know, it's like they just quit. And it was weird. They didn't make much adjustments on the offensive side of the ball. As far as the offensive line didn't get any better, they stopped running the ball completely. And then the thing that was supposed to be their bright spot of their defense, they didn't make any adjustments. I watched LSU run the same exact play 4 times in a row on the same drive, the same play, and they succeeded every single play with it. And even the commentators are like, what is Clemson's defense doing? Why are you letting them run the same play over and over again? You know what they're going to do. They're obviously, they don't care to show you, and you're still letting them do it. So to me, I think if I'm Clemson fans, I'm frustrated. And you know, the athletic directors and the GMs are sitting there saying, look, you know, we get you're prideful. Maybe back in the day when there was more under the table NIL, you could get away with, you know, you're either committed to Clemson or you're not. Now you've got to use it. Now, I think to your point, you don't necessarily need to bring 21 transfers in, because as we've seen, that's a hard thing to sustain. You know, look at Colorado and Deion. He didn't have a whole lot of his success that first year because he brought those transfers in. Now, a lot of them luckily stayed, and he still had the advantage of, you still had your core of Shedeur and Travis Hunter, but you still had to bring in other guys to help supplement. And it's hard to keep those pieces together, which is why they went bowling. They were in contention for the Big 12, but they didn't do anything with it. I think if Clemson played it smart, kind of similar to like what LSU has done, Alabama's done it, Ohio State even done it, you don't have to redo your whole roster. You can keep your core, but bring in those key pieces. You know, if you need help in the secondary, go get you a couple solid cornerbacks, even if it's just for depth and experience to have. Go get those guys. Same with your wide receivers, you know, same with your offensive line. You know, they have to look at it similar to NFL free agency. And I can't remember the coach that said it, but there was a coach that admitted it's like NFL free agency, and that's how you have to treat it. You have to go get guys that are willing to be depth guys, you know, starters, etc. And you're going to have to be willing to pay out of pocket. So I think very soon that's probably going to happen, as far as they're going to have that conversation with Dabo on, look, you need to make a change. You need to be more open to more open to ideas. And Charles brought this up, you know, nothing helps a coach like being fired to rediscover how to coach in a different way. And credit to Nick Saban. How many coaches did we see, you know, leave? They go somewhere, they become a head coach, they have an awful stunt, they go back to Alabama, relearn the basics, relearn how to be successful, and then they go off and they do become successful. You know, look at Lane Kiffin, look at Steve Sarkisian, you know, look at Bill O'Brien, look at, you know, Kirby Smart, Dan Lanning. Like, they're all successful, and they were all, or heck, even Mario Cristobal, you know, they were all successful, and they were all under Nick Saban's tree.
And it's interesting you mentioned Kirby, because I heard a stat today that they only had 8 transfers come into Georgia, but they just have their talent pool. I mean, obviously it's SEC talent pool, but it's, I mean, you know, Georgia hasn't let down a bit. You know, they're still one of the top 10 teams in the country. So it's not necessarily, I mean, obviously it's NIL, it's transfer pool, but it's also your talent base. And maybe he's not getting the talent base because he's not spending the money. He's not going after that. He knows programs are outbidding him. So that could be the biggest obstacle here.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We'll kind of skip around topics here for a minute, because I do want to get into the coaches that were fired, since we're talking about Dabo being on the hot seat. You know, we have already saw DeShaun Foster for UCLA got fired.
Yep.
We saw
it was in way over his head.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
And plus that quarterback thing they're doing with the transfers from Tennessee. That kid has been like nothing but trouble and basically has been a complete bust out there.
Yeah, Nico, and we'll get into that here in a second because I've gone on a couple rants about him before, and it's nothing really bad. It's just more disappointment than anything.
Right.
So we had DeShaun Foster got fired. Brent Key, or is it Brent Pry? Brent Key, I think. The head coach for Virginia Tech, he got fired, 3 games into the season. And now, we just saw earlier Mike Gundy, after being with Oklahoma State for 21 years, fired, which I'll be honest, I don't feel like the Mike Gundy thing is truly justified. And the reason why I say that is you look at how long he kept Oklahoma State relevant. Right. Now, you can make the argument they never went to the playoffs. They competed for the Big 12 and won it once. But other than that, they didn't really do anything as far as being spectacular goes. He still made a very successful, very winning program there. I think if I remember his win percent, like his win stats correctly, he's like 170-60 in his 21 years of being there. So he's a good coach. I do think that it might have been a combination of a little bit of complacency because, you're there for 21 years. It's your alma mater. They stuck with you through thick and thin. Right. Now they fire you. I think the other part is you have to look at the last 2 years. He's had nothing but injuries on that Oklahoma State team. And what's even worse, they have pretty deep pockets. Like if you look, I'll have to look and see the actual numbers. Statistically, for their NIL money, they're like a top 10 program in spending. I don't know where it's going because, obviously it's not correlating to on the field play. They're like top 10 in NIL spending right now.
No, remember they had Boone Pickens for years as their big sponsor.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to him, but he's not around. It's interesting. His record, I'm looking it up right now. His record is 170-89. Now,
okay.
What programs would kill for a record like that if you think about it?
Oh yeah. A ton.
But as you said, one Big 12 championship in 2011. He's achieved multiple 10-win seasons and competed for conference titles. He's won 12 bowl games over those 21 years. But I think it was embarrassing to the program the way they lost to Tulsa this weekend. In fact, he's lost 11 out of his last 12. Yeah, injuries, but to lose to Tulsa at home, national TV audience, I think the game was on ESPN, I think,
Yeah.
It was Friday night, game was on ESPN. I think it got to the point where I made the point before, maybe the message wasn't getting through anymore. That, he's known for that I'm a man speech, defending his players. And that's really, besides outside of Oklahoma, that's really all he's known for. That's all, when I hear Mike Gundy, that's all I think about. I don't think about conference titles or bowl wins or this and that, or players that have gone to the NFL out of Oklahoma State. I think of that speech and maybe the embarrassment of losing to Tulsa the way they did. Finally, the board said, all right, we got to make a change, and I think he's got like $6-7 million left on his contract, which is a spit in the wind for those kind of boosters, but still, it was I was surprised when it came down. I was definitely surprised.
Yeah. It's one of those too, like it's not like some of these coaches where they signed him to, like a 15-year deal for like $150 million, which I think is nuts, by the way. Like if there's ever a job that I want to be a college football coach and just sign to like a lucrative deal. Just pay me not to coach football. I will 100% take that with all happiness.
Well, but that's what the ex-coach of Texas A&M is doing right now.
Right. But nonetheless, though, so he gets fired, which is a huge surprise. But like you said, they lost to Tulsa of all teams. Another team that their coach is on the hot seat pretty badly because of their loss to Memphis when he all but had the game basically won is Arkansas's head coach, Sam Pittman, also not faring well, especially considering Arkansas has more of the past prominence than they do more current. Arkansas is honestly kind of, at least for the last 15, 20 years, all but been a bottom feeder team in the SEC. They've had a couple bright spots. There's a couple years there, they were a top 10 team, but then after that, they've just fallen off completely. And we really don't hear much out of Arkansas anymore. Then you look to Florida, and you probably know this better because you live in Florida. You look at the Gators, all the sponsorships that they have, all the boosters that they have, and Billy Napier is sitting there at 20-22 as a head coaching record there in Florida. And you talk about a heck of a recruiter. He has one of the top 5 recruiting classes and transfer classes coming into the next season. And you can only win one game. Like that's all you got. And it's not even.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, sorry. It's you lose a close game to USF, which give credit to USF. They are coached better than what people expected. They got wins that they probably shouldn't have. Obviously, the 2 big ones that they were going to have to deal with, they had to face Florida and Miami. I actually picked them to lose both games, and then they went 1-1. So, I mean, there's a real opportunity for them to go like 11-1 and represent the group of 6 champions. Looking at how they're coached and how they've been playing. Now, I don't think they'll necessarily go far with that.
No.
But it's a possibility. But for Florida to have that with Billy Napier, he's on the hot seat. And another one that I think it's not as big nationally, and it may be one of those I think he probably is, but again, it's maybe not making national heat. I think Luke Fickell is also on the hot seat. I mean, and I say that because you take over a program that was already pretty successful under Paul Chryst. I personally, even as somebody who's not a huge Wisconsin fan, did not understand why Wisconsin got rid of him. And I get some of the arguments that were made of, well, we're good, but he just hasn't gotten us over the hump. We haven't done much here of lately. And I get that, there is going to be, to an extent, a limitation because of the fact you're in the Big Ten. And at the time you had to face Ohio State, you had to face Michigan, you had to face Penn State on top of just competing in the Big Ten West at the time, which was basically the Wild West. You never know who was going to win that and who was going to come out of it. But they had an identity. Like a Paul Chryst team was always going to have big, strong offensive line. They were going to control the trenches no matter what. They were going to have a game managing quarterback. They were going to have a slew of running backs in the backfield that could run 200 yards on you in a game. And he was going to have a shutdown, stifling defense. And now Wisconsin doesn't have any of that. They're not, I don't know them well for throwing because their quarterbacks are almost always hurt, which means the offensive line probably isn't good. They're not known for running the ball anymore because, again, the offensive line issues. They're not good on defense. And if they are, I can't see it because, again, they're on the field too much to try to stop anybody. So, I mean, and they just broke their record last year of they had 23 straight seasons of being able to be bowl eligible, and they went 5-7 last year, and that streak was officially broken. So, I mean, to me, if I'm Luke Fickell, there has not been progress. You're about stagnant towards the bottom every year that you've been there at Wisconsin, and it's not been pretty so far.
Right. No, it definitely hasn't. And all 3 coaches you mentioned are definitely hot seat coaches. I think the buzz here in Florida about Billy Napier has been very negative. A lot of my friends who are alumni have all been like, this program isn't where it should be. Napier's not doing the job. He's embarrassing the program. We got blown out by Miami on national television this past week, So the alumni who I've spoken about 10 different alumni, and they all have saying Napier has to go. This program needs to change. So that's been the buzz down here. Regarding Pittman at Arkansas, this week's game is huge. It's at home at noon against Notre Dame, ABC television. Get your popcorn ready, because who knows with Notre Dame, because they just blew out Purdue, but they came into that game 0-2. They're ranked, but Notre Dame always gets preferential treatment with rankings and this and that, as we all know. This if they go in and beat Notre Dame, this game will save his job. I'll tell you right now. He beats Notre Dame, even if it's at home. He beats Notre Dame, national television, at home. He keeps his job. That's for sure. He loses, and then he's got to play Tennessee next week, and then Texas A&M.
Yeah, I say, because then he gets into conference play, and
that's a road. That's an absolute road. Now, talking about Luke Fickell, I expected more out of them against Alabama. Yes, it was in Alabama, but I expected more out of them defensively because, Alabama was coming off that Florida State loss, was struggling offensively, and they basically walked over Wisconsin. Wisconsin makes, they got big, they always have big guys in the trenches, and they couldn't stop a darn thing, So that game really showed a lot of the difference between the SEC and the Big Ten, in my opinion, because, Alabama's got big boys too. Don't get me wrong. But Wisconsin just couldn't do anything, and their schedule is kind of tricky. They play Michigan this week. Yep. Michigan's been very hard to read. Yes, they beat Nebraska, but they did lose to Oklahoma. Then they play Iowa, and then they play at home against Ohio State. Now, Ohio State probably between them and Miami, it's an argument of who's the best team in the country right now. Yeah. I don't think Penn State's very good, and I think Penn State will get their ass kicked this weekend against Oregon. But that's just my opinion. But
I picked Oregon, and I mainly say that because just via history,
right?
Penn State has not beaten a legitimate team.
Yeah,
like I know they beat. Let's see, who did they faced Boise State last year. Which again, that's a rout. They faced SMU in Penn State, which it was cold. That's a rout. And then they lose to Notre Dame to go on to the national championship. I thought for sure, I'm like, okay, if they have to face Notre Dame, like they have a chance. Because again, Penn State always recruits well. They're kind of in the same boat. They're always highly ranked. They're always very highly touted. But again, they just seem to choke whenever it's a fairly decent team that they have to face.
Right.
They flop.
Exactly. And people say, oh, it's a West Coast team coming east. Yeah, but the game's at 7:30 at night. Oregon's going to get in they'll probably get into town Thursday or Friday. They got a day to adjust, and even if they kept their body clocks going, so that's only a 4:30 p.m. game for them.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's doable.
Right. The interesting game, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, is the USC game against Illinois. They're playing at 12 noon.
Yes.
So the whole Big Ten expanding to the West, teams playing on the East. Now it's really starting to show itself. I know we're going away from the fired coaches, but it's all part and parcel. And I think because of the way the conferences are structured now, and the way the talent pools are changing in the conferences, the SEC conference talent pool has expanded because of these Big 12 teams coming in, and then there's talk of Florida State, maybe even Clemson going to the SEC. Yep. The Big Ten talent pool has expanded because of Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA. So, these coaches that are on the hot seat, they're on the hot seat not only because their teams aren't performing, but because they're competing in a much bigger pool now. And, are these California, you're going to get a California kid who can go to USC, play in a big conference, or is he going to come to Wisconsin and play Madison in November?
Yeah,
there's a lot to it. So I think it all kind of goes together. The Florida thing, it's warm weather. The weather's here is great. It rains in the spring, in the summer, and a little bit in the fall. But whatever. But I think they all kind of go together, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I will say too about the firings, and I had mentioned it to you in our chat. I think personally, much to your point, whoever wins this game it's essentially going to save their season. And what I mean by that, even if they, for Arkansas, it may not necessarily save their season. It'll save Sam Pittman's job,
right?
But I don't know about saving the season. And I say that because legitimately 6 of their next 8 opponents are all ranked as it stands right now.
Yeah,
because they have Notre Dame on the road at Tennessee, host Texas A&M. They host Auburn, who Auburn was ranked very recently until their loss to Oklahoma.
Right. And they're not a bad team.
No. They host Mississippi State, who they have a little bit of fire underneath them because they upset Arizona State.
Right.
And then you go on the road to LSU, on the road to Texas, and then you finish hosting Missouri. Arkansas is in for a rough bout. I think if anybody between this game, and especially for at least the hot seat part, I'm not going to say Marcus Freeman's on the hot seat by no means, because he just took them to a national title game. I mean, he's made Notre Dame relevant because, they have had big wins against teams that, in the past, Notre Dame just couldn't seem to get over that hump with.
Right.
Notre Dame, to me, needs this win more than Arkansas does. And I say that because you look at Notre Dame, they all but one have to win out because they lost two of their first games. They lost them 2 Power 4 opponents. And then after that, there's not a whole lot to really build your schedule off of as far as, okay, we've potentially beaten quality opponents, and this is enough for our resume to say we should be one of the 12 teams going into the playoffs. And I'm trying to pull their schedule up right now, and my internet's being a tiny bit slow. I know they still have USC. I know they still have Stanford. I'm not going to say Stanford's a cupcake, but it is.
Right.
So
unfortunately, they become a cupcake since joining the ACC. They just can't hang with them.
So they have Arkansas. They have Boise State. That should be a win, but again, not an impressive win because Boise State's on a downward slope. They have North Carolina State. Kind of impressive, but I mean, a middle of the pack, just outside of the top of the ACC. They do host USC, which right now USC's ranked. If they continue to roll, that could be a big game for them and a big win. But then Boston College.
What time is that game against USC?
7:30 p.m.
All right, it's a night game. Okay.
But it's October 18th, so it'll be a little chilly.
A little chilly.
Then you've got Boston College. That's kind of a joke. You've got Navy, big joke.
Right.
You've got at Pitt, maybe, and then they host Syracuse, and then they go to Stanford. So really, unless they beat USC, they don't have much on their resume to work with.
No.
Maybe with Arkansas, you can say, hey, we beat an SEC team, but it'll also depend on, how does Arkansas fare the rest of the season, especially against other big ranked opponents? Do they do well or do they falter?
That Syracuse game could mean something too, because it depends on how they fare with their schedule the rest of the year. I mean, they're coming off the huge win against Clemson. Obviously, they lost to Tennessee in the beginning of the year, but they beat UConn, beat Colgate, and win in Death Valley. So if Syracuse makes a run, if they come into that game, as an 8-win team going, playing, that game can mean something too.
That's true. But let's move on to the last ranked game, though. That was probably the biggest surprise out of this. And I don't know if I remember saying it to you or not. I do remember saying it on a show, or at least on my TikTok at one point. Indiana beat Illinois, which was a big surprise. And I did mention the fact that it seems like Cignetti can coach. He can coach a team to beat someone that's about his level.
Right.
Now, I don't know how he'll fare against, the other big teams they have left on their schedule. So at least the 3 big teams that I made highlights on, they're all on the road that they have to face. And the big names they still have to face Oregon, and it'll be in Eugene. They have to go to Happy Valley to take on Penn State. And give Penn State credit for what it is. They can beat up on bad teams or mediocre teams with no problem. Big teams, they struggle a little bit more. Mediocre to bad, they can beat up on them pretty easily. And then the other team that I think a lot of people may be sleeping on, but I feel could be a trap game, especially just because of how well their true freshman quarterback has been playing. They have to go to Maryland and take on Malik Washington, who's been fantastic for the Terps.
Yeah.
So, I mean, can you walk out of that 3 games, 1-2, maybe at best 2-1?
Well, let's see. They play in Iowa this week. Iowa obviously, not known for high scoring. Usually if you're a betting man, you take Iowa and you take the under. But then again, no one expected Illinois to come in and get trounced like that, especially
Correct.
they were ranked 9th last week. Now they're down to 23rd.
Yeah.
I think Indiana was like 19th, 18th, and they jump up like 7-8 spots, something like that.
They're like number 11. Yeah.
Right. So, let's just say they go into Iowa and win, because on paper they should win. Going to Oregon, that's a tough game. That's a very tough game, and especially where they're okay. Let's just say Indiana wins. Let's say Oregon wins this week at Penn State. they'll both move up in the rankings. That could be where game day goes. They might go to Eugene for that game, because that could be 2 top 10 teams.
Mm-hmm.
So game day might go out there. Usually, I think it was last season, there was something with Indiana. They had a game day game, and then they just kind of fell under. But they seem to have a much better quarterback this year, as you said, the freshman. So he's been playing well. Mm-hmm. And then home against Michigan State, as you said, home against UCLA. That's an interesting. And then to Maryland. The Maryland game is a trap game. Now that I'm looking at it, it is. I do see it as a trap game because of that quarterback. Maryland's played a lot better than a lot of people think, and their quarterback has played a lot better than a lot of people have thought for a freshman. If you think about it in that conference, and to have an out of conference game so late in the schedule like that is pretty crazy, especially against a Power 4 team like that. Usually, you play another roast beef Tech later in the season as a warm up, but to play a Power 4 team that late, especially in Maryland, and we'll see where Maryland's at that point. And to go to Happy Valley and whatever. Penn, as I said, Penn State. I'm not impressed with Penn State. They got it. We just talked about it. They need to win a big game. If they win this week, I'll change my tune on Penn State. But for now, I don't see the Penn State game. It could be a trap for Indiana. But if Penn State loses and then maybe loses again, come that point. I mean, who knows? I mean, Penn State doesn't have much of a hard schedule. If we look at their schedule, they got the Ohio State. The Ohio State game is before they play at Ohio State before they play at home against Indiana. So,
and depending on. Yeah, I think to your point, depending on how they do against Oregon, and then depending on how they do against Ohio State, it might be a must-win game for them as far as potentially making an argument to get into the playoffs again. Even
exactly. So there's a bunch of what ifs that are going to happen the next couple of weeks, especially in the Big Ten, between hot seat coaches, between teams like Indiana, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State. It's going to be some good football, and definitely. Glad to watch it on my couch every Saturday.
I know that. I think that's the best part about not traveling anymore. Is it's like, man, I don't have to be on a plane and flying for 6 hours and miss all of college football while I'm doing it. Nope, I can be at home watching all the games that I want.
The best is I'll prop up when I'm at my gig, I'll prop up my phone and people think I'm looking at my phone for lyrics. No, I'm watching the game while I'm performing.
Right? Is he looking at lyrics or music sheets? Yeah, lyrics and music sheets. You're right.
That's what I'm looking at.
But let's kind of come close to the end of the show talking about your team and talking about a former quarterback of yours. Because right now you guys. I know we've talked about it for years and years. You guys are in a quarterback nightmare ever since Eli has left. You had Danny Dimes, you've had Tyrod Taylor, you've had what's the kid that broke Eli's streak that they put in for him?
Geno Smith.
You guys have had everybody, and then it was announced today Jackson Dart is going to be the starter. In place of Russ after the fall of the Chiefs, who the Chiefs are looking pretty mediocre.
Yes.
And it was funny because I put one of the questions, is it time to start Dart? And they did it. That's already going through. So we can watch that one. For you as a Giants fan, do you think that depending on how the rest of the season goes, more than likely the GM and coach typically get fired together? Because whoever comes in as the next GM is like, this is not my guy. Get him out. Do you think both should be fired, or do you think DaBoll should be given another year? Because let's be honest, this GM for New York, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, because obviously you're the Giants fan. You pay a little bit more attention than I do. He's built a great defense on paper. Yes. Like the names and talent alone that he has on that defense are top tier. They don't have a complementary offense, which is something that they've struggled with for a long time. The offensive line has issues. I'm really not sure about their running game. Obviously, they do have a stud in Malik Neighbors. It's kind of disappointing that I feel like Jalen Hyatt hasn't really come into his own after he was so good at Tennessee. But for you as a Giants fan, do you want both fired, or would you just want DaBoll to finally get a competent GM, see what DaBoll can do with, say, a rookie quarterback like Dart, and then make an evaluation for the following season?
There's three ways to look at it, and I have thought about this today once I saw the news after watching them Sunday night. After watching them against Dallas and watching them Sunday night, obviously, and then watching Dallas against Chicago, obviously their defense is terrible, so you can't take that much out of the Dallas game.
Yeah.
Even though Russ looked like old Russ, I could have thrown for 300 yards against that Dallas defense.
Right.
It's crazy. So yes, defensively they have built a very good defense, But what good is your good defense if it's on the field so damn much when your offense can't move the ball?
Yep.
That's the biggest problem here right now. The offense can't move the ball. Why can't the offense move the ball? Number one, it's offensive line has been our Achilles heel for years. They've tried to address it. They've got guys who can't stay healthy. Andrew Thomas is out again. He got hurt. He's not going to be able to play this week. So okay, fine. But watching Russell Wilson in game 1 and game 3, you see the same thing. He's not dropping as far back into the pocket as he should, so he's not getting the visual. Number 2, I've always said, he's always been short. He's always had to make up for his shortcomings as far as moving around the pocket. Fine, he's moving around the pocket, but there were 3 or 4 plays the other on Sunday night where they have the ball down the goal line where he's just throwing the ball out of the end zone. I understand that, but if you've got it, if you're at the point where it's 22-9, you've got nothing to lose at that point. Throw the ball at least towards somebody. Try to get a call. Try to get something happening. And he's too. I don't want to throw an interception. And then if you look at the 2 interceptions he did throw, both balls were underthrown. The second interception to Malik Neighbors in the end zone, the ball is completely underthrown. You see at the end of the play, the Kansas City guy catches it. Malik just walks off, shaking his head like, "How the hell am I supposed to catch that?" And it's right. You want to throw it up and let Malik get it, but you got to put it up so he can get it. He can't reach over, because if he reaches over the defensive back, that's offensive pass interference. Yeah, he might save the play, but it's still a penalty. That's still 15 yards the other way, and so either way you lose. The first interception could kind of have been looked at maybe as like a punt. The way it was thrown and how deep it was down, but the receiver wasn't open. It shouldn't have been thrown. So I'm completely over this. I'm happy to see this rookie getting a shot. He looked decent in preseason. I'll admit, I watched some tape of him from college after he was drafted to see his skill set. And the kid could run, the kid can move. He's a bigger kid. He's definitely taller. But the key to this, the key to the whole thing is going to be the play calling and utilizing his skill set. And I use the word skill set because we all see what Daniel Jones is doing in Indianapolis now.
Yeah.
So why couldn't Daniel Jones do that for us? Because, and I've said this for years about every program, I think you and I have had discussions about this. You need your quarterback to fulfill. You need to take your quarterback and say, all right, what does he do well? And you need to put the offense around him. That's why guys like Lamar Jackson, who I still think is overrated, have done well in Baltimore in general, because they've created an offense around his skill set. They've created an offense around Patrick Mahomes' skill set. They created an offense around Brady's skill set in New England in those first couple of years. The whole dink and dunk thing before he got to Tampa, and I can't remember who his coach was at the time. Let him rip. Say, hey kid, just let it go. But he had better receivers in Tampa anyway. So do I want DaBoll fired? Not yet. I think it's really up to DaBoll and the OC to say, okay, we've got this kid who's young. He can run. He can move. He can create. Let's create things so he can get out of the pocket, get the cornerback to draw in so he can get the ball to Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors is a superstar. I mean, he's got that Jefferson, Jamar Chase build. This kid, if this kid got the ball thrown to him, he would be up on that level, So we've got that,
All LSU Tigers, by the way,
exactly all LSU Tigers.
they know how to build them down there.
Coach O is loving it right now.
But yeah, so do you think it should be the GM? Because I mean, this is the same GM that basically looked at Saquon and said, "Yeah, man, we we don't think it's worth paying you. We need to pay Daniel first. If you can find somebody to pay you the money, cool. Wish you the best of luck. And you let him go to your your division rival, and that he has an absolutely amazing season and runs over everybody, Giants included. So do you think he should be fired at least?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because you said about the defense that he built, and he did build a defense. Bill Parcells always had a theory. He said you build your teams from the inside out. Yeah. Well, he built the in, but he didn't build the side. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know if the Mara family would fire him and not DaBoll. I think they were a package, because they seem to come together as a package. I mean, it's really going to all depends on how this team performs. I mean, they play the Chargers this week, who are a hell of a team. But, remember, they got, a West Coast game coming to the East Coast, 1:00 game. There's always the theory of, there's always that theory. But, I mean, it seems like Justin Herbert has found his team, found his coach, and Harbaugh is the guy for him. And you see the way that offense is clicking. Although they just lost
Najee Harris,
yeah. So that could be something. And I know they have an offensive lineman out, and Khalil Mack hasn't really played, to his potential. Yeah. But this game is a test game. You can't really. I'm not going to judge on this game. I'm going to judge on the next game when they play New Orleans.
That's fair.
New Orleans is terrible.
Yes, they are.
I mean, they're terrible. The game's in New Orleans. Okay, that stadium can be crazy, but the game is going to be inside, controlled environment. The kid went to Ole Miss. Chances are a lot of people who rooted for him can it's not that far to drive to New Orleans from is it Starksville, I think, where the school is? I can't remember.
Yes.
Or one of the Oxford or Scarsville. I don't remember. Anyway, point being, that's the game where you can make the judgment. If they go, let me get the Giants schedule up. I'm gonna before I say anything, I want to look at this, because I want to get my facts right. Okay. All right, games. Here it is. Okay, perfect. All right, so they're home against. I was going to say San Diego. I still call them San Diego.
So close.
Yeah. They're home against the LA Chargers this week. This first game, test game. See what the kids got. Then they go to New Orleans. Fine. Short week at home against the Eagles. Tough.
Yeah.
Then they go to Denver, and then they go to Philadelphia. So there's the next 5 games, no matter who was quarterbacking, is tough, no matter what, how you look at it. But if they can come out of there, I'm going to say I'll be happy with 1 win, possibly 2. But if the kid looks good and is making progress, okay. If it's the same stagnant office and same poor play calling that they've had, then I'm going to be like, all right, we've got a clean house. Because the bottom line is, there was a couple play calls in this Kansas City game that I saw. Some of the 4th down calls that they called, and the play call was just horrible, when they're just like, all right, we're going to telegraph running the ball. They know you're going to run the ball. Run the tight end option. Run the ball to the opposite side of the field. They're not being creative. And I don't know if they didn't have enough faith in Russell, if they were just setting him up for failure. I don't know. But they've got to take this kid's skill set, be creative, do what they can do, what they know. They drafted this kid. They moved up to draft this kid, do what they need to do to get this kid moving, give him confidence, give him some screenplays, give him some, some out of the pocket stuff. The read option is going to be used with him. And you mentioned running back before. This kid, Cam Scatteraboo, he's the real deal.
Yeah.
He reminds me of McCaffrey from San Francisco. Big bull kid, can run through the bull, can catch the ball out of the backfield. Not afraid to go head first, which might injure him down the road.
He may not be there long.
Exactly, but if they can keep this kid healthy, he could be Jackson Dart's best friend back there.
Yeah, and he could potentially be kind of the Giants of old, of with Eli and Brandon Jacobs, Ahmad Bradshaw, of big power running back, run through you, and then keep going. Exactly. So real quick, we'll move on to our last topic. We'll talk about the Colts, and your former quarterback Daniel Jones is 3-0 with them. putting up unbelievable gaudy numbers, which is insane that he's finally doing that, like you said. But at what point do you think that I'm not going to say Cinderella story, but do you think that the Colts kind of come back down to reality? Because, I mean, looking at their schedule, their schedule's not bad. They have a couple tough games, but realistically, most of them are winnable. This upcoming game, they go to the Rams. That's a potential loss. Just depending on how
McVay coaches the way he coached in the second half this week, they'll win that game.
Right. Then they host the Raiders. That should be a win.
That's a win.
They host the Cardinals. That's a win. That's a maybe, should be a win. But then they go to Los Angeles again to take on the Chargers. That could, I feel like that could go 50-50. Then they host the Titans. They go to Pittsburgh. They host the Falcons. But that one's overseas. I can't remember if that's in London or Germany. But then they go to Arrowhead, which, fun fact, Patrick Mahomes has actually never beaten the Colts, believe it or not.
That game's in Berlin, by the way.
Berlin, okay. Yes. I thought it was one of the games in Germany.
Right.
Then they host the Texans. They go to Jacksonville, which they have not won in Jacksonville in like 10 years. Then they go to Seattle. They host the 49ers. They host Jacksonville, and then to end the season, they go to Houston.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of wins that are potentially there. As far as if I personally was to say a team that I think potentially brings them back down to earth, if it's not the Rams, I think the Chargers do. I think it's as far as week 7 before we say, okay, they need to potentially come back down to earth. Now, obviously, the beautiful thing about football, it could happen at any point, but I think it'll be more with the Chargers than anybody.
Well, as we learned this week, any given Sunday with Cleveland beating Green Bay and Green Bay choking in the last 5 minutes, so anything can happen, as you just said. But on paper, the reality game, they should be 5-0 going to Los Angeles to play the Chargers.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I take that back. No, they should be 5-1 because I think they're going to lose in Los Angeles this week. Okay. Let me take that. Let me rephrase that. Okay, I think they lose to the Rams, beat the Raiders, beat the Cardinals at home. I think they hold home court throughout the year. Because I don't really see a home loss on their schedule. Maybe the 49ers, depending on what's going on with them health-wise. But I see them.
That's one of the last 3 games of the season. So who
so
knows?
I could see them holding court at home, even in Germany. So that's that'll be 9 wins there. I mean, they definitely at this point I think can be a playoff team. I mean, the Steelers game, who knows? Because we've seen the Steelers have not looked that good. The Steelers did not win this week. New England lost that game. 5 turnovers. And Pittsburgh did not look that good. So they did not win. So I could see them beating the Steelers. I think the biggest thing with this team is, remember, they're an indoor team. Yes, they won outside this week, but, it was beautiful in Tennessee this week.
It was.
What's November 2nd when they go to Pittsburgh? Let's see how the weather is. When they go to Arrowhead on the 23rd, we'll see how the weather is.
Yeah.
Seattle is always hit or miss. Seattle seems to be playing pretty decently at the beginning, but let's see how that offense holds up with Sam Darnold. But at this point, looking at the schedule and knowing what the Colts are, this team will probably win the AFC South. Possibly pretty convincingly because, Houston's off to an 0-3 start. They're not doing anything. Tennessee's a wash this year. Just a first year with the rookie, and Cam Ward does not look very good, but he doesn't really have much around him.
Yeah.
And Jacksonville is very unpredictable because, did you see, I don't know if it was last week, there was was it last week where Trevor Lawrence blew off something that the coach told him or something like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was against Cincinnati. Yeah.
Right. So who knows what's going on there? So, and trust me, it frustrates the hell out of me watching this, seeing Daniel Jones succeed the way he's succeeding right now. I mean, but we talked about skill set. We talked about coaches, and plus, they've got one of the best running backs in the league. Yeah. So, and they've got good receivers, they've got a good offensive scheme and they're utilizing it to what they have, Anthony Richardson, is his career done in Indianapolis? Possibly, because if Jones succeeds the way he's succeeding, he's going to get a multi-year deal, and then Richardson's going to be a career backup. So,
right.
This team's headed for good places, and you living in Indianapolis, I'm sure the buzz is pretty high on them right now.
It to be honest, I haven't heard a lot of buzz. I think it's one of those people are more in shock at the current moment as it stands. And it's just kind of one of those, like, when does it happen? Like, when do we finally come back down to earth? But I will say people are happy, but I think they're just more surprised than anything.
I got to ask you one question completely off of football. What's the buzz with the Indiana Fever right now being in the WNBA semifinals without Caitlin Clark, without Sophie Cunningham?
I'll be honest, I have no idea. Since she's been out, there's like no Fever news.
No. Okay. All right. I just wondered.
But buddy, we are coming up to the end, unfortunately, though. But I appreciate you coming on, good sir. Appreciate everybody tuning in. If you like more of this, you can definitely check me out anywhere social media wise inside the Hoosier Mind. You can definitely check out Yoel. And he primarily does music, but he does love to talk about sports as well. And then, of course, if anybody and everybody would check out Military Broadcast Radio, check out all the great veteran hosts and voices that we have here on the network that are great. They love to give advice, love to teach, talk pretty much any topic. But I hope everybody has a good night, and we will see y'all next week.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today.